we're on with another episode of Hypno Talk. And today we have another certified hypnotherapist with Anna, who has incredible experience. I always recommend so many of my friends and family to work with Anna just because she has such a dynamic practice. She's one, incredibly relatable. You're going to find in this episode that there's a lot you can see in yourself and just what we're learning here together. But today's episode is specifically around dreams. And Anna does a really beautiful job of integrating dream work, understanding what's going on in the mind into hypnotherapy. So, what's already coming in your mind can naturally start to create change for the future. So, Anna, I'll have you introduce yourself, just share a little bit about your background and introduce dreams for us today.
Of course, of course. Thank you so much for having me. And I love, love, love dreams. I love talking about dreams. And the way, just really, I think a good place to start would be, what is a dream? What is a dream? Essentially, dreams, we all dream. A lot of times people think that they don't dream. And a lot of times people may say, it's very valid to say, I don't remember my dreams, but a lot of us think we don't have dreams. And we actually all do. Dreaming is as natural of a process as walking, speaking, it's anything like that. It's a part of what we do because the brain builds up a chemical in the brain called, it's basically, we call it message units, information coming in throughout the day. And the brain, the subconscious mind can't process everything out without getting overloaded. And so dreaming is essentially for that. The biggest reason is to vent out all of the information that it's processing. And also to make predicting, not word for word verbatim predicting, but kind of we're meaning making machines. Human beings like to make meaning. And so a lot of times we'll kind of say, okay, if this happened today, the subconscious mind likes to kind of see what's the natural course, what's going to happen tomorrow. If this is today, this is tomorrow. And then a lot of it is also just almost think of it like a filing cabinet. You come home from work, you go into your mailbox, this is junk mail, this is mail, this I need, this is a bill, whatever. This is how it was explained to me. And it really made a lot of sense because a lot of information, like seeing someone standing at a bus stop, is not really useful. So the brain just kind of gets rid of that. It doesn't need to record it. It doesn't need to keep it. But right before we wake up is the part where we really look at. So in my practice with my clients, I really look at that period before they wake up, which is a really, really important stage. It's called the venting stage. And that's the part that kind of will tell us a lot of what we need to know of what the client is going through.
Okay. So, right, if you remember that little bit right before you wake up in your dream, that's enough. That's enough to bring to session and to dissect a little bit further because I often feel like I don't have the full picture. I maybe have like certain
Mhm.
images or yeah, an animal, or I saw myself at my parents' couch. So it doesn't always have a storyline that I can deliver, but these images do come through.
Absolutely. And that's why I think a storyline isn't as critical as opposed to certain questions that I like to ask. So there's a series of questions that I always ask. First I'll ask, what was the stage of the dream? Was it physical? Was it physiological, or was it psychological? Was it, what time period was it? Did it relate to any time period in your life? For instance, like you mentioned, I was at my parents' house when I was a kid. That can tell us that whatever emotionally you're going through, whatever the brain is showing us, that particular emotional thing could be going as far back as that time when you were that age, that, going back to sitting on your parents' couch in the house. So a lot of times those questions that I ask will lead us to where we need to go. We don't need to have the full picture because dreams don't speak in full pictures.
Yeah, and something that comes up for me is I grew up definitely, my mom was so superstitious. So we had all these meanings of, yeah, snakes mean something, teeth falling out means something else, seeing a bride has a different meaning.
Same.
And it feels like this map that we have to decode, one rule around dreams, but that doesn't entirely feel true.
Well, I don't even know if it's a matter of true or not true, because I think it's more a matter of what the style of, or what the training is, or what the train of thought really is. For instance, Sigmund Freud used to say the dreams are more, wish fulfillment. A lot of times his dreams were leaning towards sexuality or sexual fulfillment, those kind of things. Carl Jung was more like self-realization, things that had like hidden meanings, that would come out. And Carl Jung, a lot of times, the dreams you saw were very mythical, like the wise man or, archetypal, like those kind of things. So, yes, you had to remember symbolically, kind of like you grew up, kind of exactly how I grew up. I grew up literally every morning, my family, same thing, oh, you saw your teeth falling out. We got to go to this. We got to do this. We got to, don't tell me your dream unless you're letting the water run. That was also a thing, so we really had a lot of different superstitions as well. But to me, it's more a matter of getting to the same destination in a different car. And I think that once you understand that the brain works in very individual ways, and some people, whether you're Freud, whether you're, Carl Jung, whether you're Kappas, I was Kappasinian method. And so for me, the dream is not so much to remember symbols, because symbolically a dog can be my best friend because I've, grown up with dogs. I love dogs. They're fuzzy, they're cuddly. But if you were bitten as a child, that to you can signify an enemy. That to you can signify danger. So for me, I don't really look at particular symbols in the dream. Yes, there's symbols, but it's those questions that I come back to. What was the emotion in the dream? What was the stage of the dream? Who was in the dream? A lot of times if you're seeing other people, it could point to parts of us. So your subconscious will show you in a safe environment, in a safe contained space, what it is that you're going through and what you need to process. It could show you to yourself as the neighbor or as somebody else who you'll make the association with. And then they'll show that neighbor doing X, Y, and Z. In a sense, takes the pressure of remembering each symbol off, because I think it makes it more of a scavenger hunt and an individual, search for answers and meaning.
Yeah, and there's like this powerlessness around superstition where if you see something or it comes to you in a dream, it is now predicting your future and your fate is destined. It feels less about the future and what is going to presumably happen to you and more about what do you have to do? What are you in the middle of? Sounds like you're taking the content from the dream and then you're using that in hypnotherapy rather than being like, well, you're doomed. Like it feels more workable. So tell us
Exactly.
how we can work with.
So yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think a lot of the thinking of the predicting, like, oh, this is going to happen, or I think I'm going to die, or whatever it is that we see, there is a stage in the dreaming process. And it's usually towards the middle of the night where you're kind of in a predictive state. We call it the predictive stage. And that's simply because the brain likes to make meaning. It doesn't mean that's what's going to happen. It just means the brain is kind of saying, okay, if 1 + 1 = 2, what's 2 + 2? It's just one of these like logical almost things. However, what we do is let's say you had this dream, and let's say you give me this picture of, I dreamt this, this, and this. We're going to, after decoding it with my client, first I'm going to ask them what their emotion was. First, I'm going to ask them what the stage is. All those questions that I said, the stage, the emotion, physiological or psychological, all of these things. And once we get all of that information and we together figure out how it relates to their presenting issue today, their particular life today, their particular situation that we're working through, most of the times it will relate to exactly what we're working through. And then a lot of times what I will do is take that dream and I'll weave it into the next session, taking somebody into the journey of their own subconscious mind. And what their subconscious mind came up with is really, really powerful, because it's our own mind that came up with this story. Even if it seems like it's in a different language, somehow when we go in, there's this innate recognition of, oh, I've been there. I've been in this kitchen that had the stove falling apart. And now it's like the brain immediately latches onto that.
I imagine somebody who's like, "Oh, I don't dream. This is not normal for me." That it feels almost disappointing. Like, I guess I don't have access to this part, this tool of dreaming and using dream for subconscious reprogramming. But we do know that when people are in the practice of hypnotherapy, suddenly those dreams start to become more active. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's almost like taking the lid off of a container. And people think that they don't dream, but they just simply don't remember them a lot of times, including myself. I've had that too. There's different processes that we can do. There's different exercises to help you remember your dreams. A lot of times clients think that they need to know what their dreams mean, or they get a little, embarrassed. Oh, I dreamt this. I think, I don't even want to tell you about it. It was really, really weird. But most of the times it's not, what somebody thinks is either embarrassing embarrassing or, overwhelming or scary. It's really just the mind speaking a different language.
I find that really interesting to, the feeling of, oh, I don't want to share my dream because it's embarrassing or it's scary or my mind is really dark. And that often makes people actually even more afraid of going into the depths of their minds because what if I go deep down, I'm not a good person or there's the darkness down there and I'd rather not look at what's in that space. Tell us a little bit about that because I imagine people probably have resistance to dream work if they haven't actually received the benefits of it.
I would think, to me, as you're saying that, I'm thinking of it in the same exact terms as hypnotherapy. I think it's the same type of thing where until, lack of knowledge, lack of education can make you intimidated and it could look scary to somebody. Just like people that don't have knowledge of what hypnotherapy is, they can think you're losing control. When in essence, the last thing, nobody's ever lost control. You only go into hypnotherapy to gain control. And so it's the same thing with dreams. Once you stop for a moment and really understand that this isn't losing a part of yourself, this isn't admitting anything, this isn't, just because you have a dream of something that can seem like it's intimidating or scary or sexual in some way that could seem like it's, completely opposite from your conscious mind daily living life. I have to always remember that what your subconscious mind is telling you is not necessarily definitive of who you are in that conscious day-to-day life.
So let's say you do imagine yourself fighting with your partner or a friend in your dream, but you wake up and you're thinking, I don't actually want that. That's not really how I feel. What are some alternative paths that you see people go down instead?
To me, I would ask all those questions that I said first because I don't think it's just about you're fighting with a friend. A lot of times I would look at who that friend is. I would look at what the emotion is and what the subconscious really how it's relating to your life today. So if you're fighting with a friend, what about yourself are you fighting? Who are you Does this friend relate to your life today in some way? Or is it something within your own mind? And another thing is this something you literally just had in your life? That's one of the questions. So in other words, if you're fighting with your friend, did you just have an argument before you went to sleep? Did you hear did you hear something as you were falling asleep? Did you hear a nasty message and so it implanted itself in your mind? So this is what I mean about it's not so much, oh, I see myself fighting in my dream with this friend. What does that mean? Because it would really take me asking all those questions.
I like that. That feels very parallel to hypnotherapy altogether, where sometimes you don't need to play it out in real life, or you can practice it in the mind's eye
Mhm.
before you play it out in real life. And so it seems like your brain is automatically doing that in the dream state, and then through hypnotherapy, you are consciously and almost intentionally, I would say, making things happen or changing your way of showing up in the world.
That's exactly it, because you gotta keep in mind, Hilay, is that your subconscious mind, if we keep in mind that its only job is to keep you safe, it will never bring up something in a dream that it doesn't feel you're safe. It doesn't feel safe enough to express and bring into the conscious mind. So you may think you're not ready to process something, you may think that you're not ready to go through something, but your dreams may tell us otherwise.
Okay. So I want to test you here. What about nightmares when we run into those moments where yeah, you wake up frantic or you have repeated dreams that are not comfortable and you'd rather avoid? Tell us about.
Again, your subconscious mind will keep bringing something up until you've worked through it. So if you have like a night terror, a recurring night terror, it's probably because you're ignoring something. You're probably not paying attention to something, because more often than not, once you start going in and once you bring that to the surface, those dreams usually stop, those night terrors. And again, it really depends on what the dream is. What seems like a monster or something scary or somebody killing you could just be an emotion that is dying. It could be something that you are finally processing through. If it's something that is continually recurring, it's probably because you're not processing something in your waking hours.
Yeah, that the mind is already communicating with us, but are we listening and how are we actually communicating back with it? So hypnotherapy kind of feels like that response to what the mind is already speaking.
You know, it's a lot of my sessions within my hypnosis. I will make the suggestion that your dreams will continue to do this work even long after the session is done. And that's something that I always say because I found that in all the sessions, most of the time, what we do during the session is one thing, but then they'll come to me and say, you know, wow, I've had my dreams have been telling me X, Y, and Z. We start seeing that just by implanting that suggestions, your dreams will continue to do the work. Your subconscious mind keeps working, you know, underneath the radar. It keeps working even as we sleep. So it's not that we do the session and then it's done. We don't have to tell ourselves to dream. We don't have to remember the dream. We just have to go to sleep and let the natural process happen.
It's a really nice way to do any kind of healing work, to say that my dreams, when I'm asleep, when I'm in my most relaxed state, things are changing. The mind is venting. Like I'm getting a new perspective and showing up in the world. I wake up in the morning and I can actually be a different person. The work is happening for you in your resting state, which is so cool to hear you share that.
It's really amazing and it's really powerful too, I think, to the individual, to each one of us when we can wake up and somewhere within our subconscious awareness, we remember, wow, I remember this, you know, and I remember hearing that I'm gonna remember my dreams, or I remember hearing that they're gonna keep working even when I'm asleep. It's very powerful because then you're like, it's almost like tangible proof. You know, you see that your mind is actually doing something even without you trying.
I think that's one of the coolest parts of hypnotherapy is that it's not just a lot of work. Yes, you have to show up. Yes, you have to be open to the process. The main essence of hypnotherapy is let's relax you into healing. Let's bring calm to whatever is triggering you.
Yeah, love that. Relax you into healing.
I don't feel like we really get anybody calling in saying, "Hey, I want to sign up to work on my dreams or to enhance dreams." It's such a extra secret bonus that most people don't even know is a part of this process. Would you say that you incorporate dreams with just about any type of issue that somebody comes in with, or are there certain issues that are more helpful?
Interestingly enough, I would say that in 90% of my sessions, at some point, we do dream analysis and we do dream therapy because it is such a huge tool. It's such a big part of what I do because a lot of times, what we know consciously, what we see consciously, what we bring to the table into the journey consciously is very different than what our subconscious mind is doing underneath. And so when you bring the two together, it's really, really powerful. And so I would say 90% of my sessions include some form of dream therapy. Maybe not in the first one or the second one, but once a client realizes that their dreams are actually as powerful as they are, and once they realize that I do dream analysis, it becomes a really big, big, big part of what I do.
It sounds almost like at some point, once you get good at the process and the questioning, you could do your own dream analysis. Like once you are able to reflect, then is there a little bit of a system, or is there a bit of inhibition with somebody understanding their own dreams?
I think you can do your own dream analysis. I try to if I remembered my own dreams, but I think it's like anything else. You can do your own hypnosis, but it's always better when somebody else does it. Yes, I can probably look into my dreams and I can sit down and take a piece of paper and ask myself all the same questions and then look at the big picture of what's in front of me.
That brings me kind of to my next question. It sounds like the dreams open up your periphery. So you might be really narrowed in on this is where I want to go, this is who I want to become. I want this outcome so bad that you really miss out on everything else that's happening, the big picture. And then the dream might surprise you with some insight that perhaps you don't see in your waking life, is what it's sounding like.
I think that's pretty accurate, actually. Yeah, I think it definitely can do that. We all naturally get very zeroed in on what we want. Like I want this outcome, and then we just put on the blinders and we don't see what else is possible. So that's the conscious mind, but the subconscious mind is always in the back, and it's always on board, and it's always doing the work.
I'm curious, you said that sometimes you take some time before you introduce a dream work. If people have resistance to this, and what are some ways to make yourself more open to the dream work, or maybe remembering your dreams a little bit better if you want to get into this practice and you're quite new to it?
One thing is remembering the dreams. That's really the first thing. And I think a lot of people don't remember dreams. The ones that remember dreams, they remember them in a lot of detail. A lot of people don't. So you can go to sleep when you're laying down to sleep, you can start saying a mantra, I will remember to remember my dreams. We will remember to remember my dreams. We can also work that into a hypnotherapy session a little bit more deeply as a suggestion. But, I think that I haven't really had resistance to it. Most people are really, really open if they can remember. Most time, the only resistance is their own subconscious mind not remembering. I think the point of our dreams is not always to be remembered. A lot of times it's just a venting process. A lot of times the body just needs to release, you vent it out, process it out. And really, you can look at remembering it almost like a cherry on top that I do as a hypnotherapist. But as an individual, you don't really have to remember every single part of your dream in order for it to do the benefit. They've done so many sleep studies and they found that not dreaming is actually as detrimental as not sleeping. And you can go longer not eating than you can not sleeping. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. And so you kind of say, okay, so dreaming is super important. Whether I remember it or not, that's already more of a therapeutic thing. But the process of dreaming, we all go through it. It's a very natural, necessary process.
Wow, I think there's just so much mystery around dreaming that there is a venting process that's connected to our emotions and our psyche, our self development.
There is yes, absolutely. There's a chemical when I was talking about the chemical in the brain, adenosine. That is a chemical that your brain releases throughout the day. The more of this chemical that is in your brain, the more you feel exhausted and your brain wants to sleep. It's almost like lights out, like the curtain closing on a show saying, okay, we're done. We're like, this is it. If the more the body releases it, the more we need to sleep. The venting process is the body's natural way of releasing, of taking whatever's coming in, whatever overload is coming in, you're releasing it through the dreaming process.
You really put into perspective how much we are intaking throughout the day, all the stimulus, all the little things that the subconscious mind is making sure that you're safe when you're crossing the road or, passing by somebody that you overhear a conversation.
Absolutely. That's why we just, your body, and everybody's levels are different. Your level might be more, and that's why you may have a higher ability to take in more stimulus as the next person, than the next person. But it's not about being broken. It's about listening to your body. We're not broken. We're designed this way. There's a reason we're designed this way. And if we listen, if we just stop long enough to honor the body, to honor what is happening, and then we work with it, then we start to flow with it, as opposed to kind of saying, I don't want to sleep.
Yeah, and the one of the most like natural byproducts of hypnotherapy is sleep. So even if you don't come for sleep, it's a nice free bonus that you get is that your
I
brain
love that.
learns how to sleep.
Every client tells me that they sleep better, that they're sleeping better after sessions. Every single client is sleeping better.
Yeah, that's what's really cool. Like I think a lot of people don't even realize hypnotherapy works well for sleep. Suddenly the brain knows how to turn the volume down, to relax.
I think some of us think that it's a certain type of a person, but it's really every type of person. This work is for everyone because we're all human. We all have emotions. We all dream. Even if you're not here for anxiety, your sleep gets better. Even if you're not here for sleep, your confidence improves. But a lot of people in today's fast-paced world, they want results today. They want to work symptomatically. They want to work with anxiety, with sleep, with their dream. I think that once we get out of our own way, we're able to see that so much improves. It's that beautiful onion we're peeling. We don't know what's underneath until we start taking the layers off.
That's beautiful. It really does go for anybody and whether you have that intention or not, you're going to get a very well-rounded 360 human transformation. It's just a natural part of this work.
Absolutely.